I never realized how much a voice could weigh until it arrived muffled through the floorboards, carrying the sound of forks clinking against porcelain and a woman's practiced laugh stretching just a little too long. The cardigan had a tear under the left sleeve. I'd stitched it once with navy thread because I'd run out of beige. The seam always pulled a little when I raised my arm, but it was warm and it didn't itch. I wore it anyway. I carried the banana bread on a ceramic dish, white with a blue rim, same set Walter bought the year we couldn't afford new tires. I didn't knock. It was my house once, in the way that dry riverbeds were once rivers. When I stepped onto the last stair, the light from the kitchen hit the wall across the hallway. I could hear Travis before I saw him. "Don't come up right now, Mom. Just stay downstairs, okay?" His body blocked the frame. One arm stretched across the wall like he needed something to lean against. I noticed he had gel in his hair, the kind that smelled like limes. He only used it when people were over. "There are guests. It's better this way." He didn't look at the plate. He didn't look at my hands. I heard Camille from further in. She didn't lower her voice. "She doesn't exactly match the decor, does she?" There was a pause then, an ache of silence, so still I felt the sound of my own heartbeat in my teeth. Travis stepped back just slightly, then reached for the door at the top of the stairs. The one I had never seen closed from that side. The lock clicked. Not loud, not theatrical, just final. I held the plate without moving. A crumb slid off the edge and hit the floor by my slipper. I didn't pick it up. The steps creaked, more going down. I counted them, 12, like always. I pressed the light switch with the back of my wrist. The bulb buzzed once, then steadied. The ceiling was low enough to touch if I stretched. I didn't. There's a folding chair by the utility sink. Metal old. Walter used to sit in it when he changed the filters in the heater. There's still a rust stain under one leg. I sat there, cardigan still buttoned, banana bread still whole. The vent above me hummed. I could hear someone upstairs say, "These are artisan," and another voice replied, "Locally sourced." Then the kind of laugh people make when they're proving they belong. I broke a piece of bread and put it in my mouth. It was dry. I hadn't added enough oil this time. I used to be able to tell by the color of the batter. I guess I stopped looking. There's a photograph of Travis in the corner of the basement, behind the storage bins. His graduation photo from high school. I had framed it in walnut real wood, not laminate, and wrote a note on the back in pen that bled through. "So proud of you. Love, Mom." Camille said it didn't match the nursery palette when they moved in, so it ended up here under old Christmas lights and a plastic snowman with one eye missing. There's also a box labeled Misk, Mom, stuff. I've never opened it. I don't remember packing it. When Travis was small, he used to ask me to draw mazes on napkins during church to keep him from fidgeting. I'd draw a castle at the center and a dragon outside the lines, and he'd spend the whole sermon tracing paths with his finger whispering, "Almost." Once he said he'd build me a real castle with no stairs so you don't get tired. There are stairs here. And a lock. I set the plate on the concrete floor. One slice gone, 11 remain. The edge of the dish clinks softly against the floor. The sound barely registers beneath the upstairs music, jazzy, curated, expensive. There's a spider web in the corner that I don't sweep. It holds its shape better than most things down here. At one point, I heard Camille's voice again through the vent. She was telling a story about a woman who wore orthopedic sandals to brunch. Someone gasped as if it were a sin. She wore them like she thought they were charming. Another round of laughter. Walter used to wear mismatched socks, blue and gray, said it was lucky. I never corrected him. I checked the clock above the water heater. Nearly 8. The bread would be cold by now. I should have covered it in foil, but I'd used the last sheet yesterday reheating rice. Camille says microwave rice dries out because I don't stir it right. I don't stir it at all. The light flickered once. I didn't move. I thought briefly about knocking again, about saying something, anything. But the words sat flat in my mouth like marbles, not even worth swallowing. Somewhere upstairs, someone was asking Travis about his design firm. He was using the voice he saves for clients, measured, polished, gently amused by himself. The voice he used on me the day he said, "You're not exactly working anymore. Mom, so it just makes sense that you don't contribute decisions." The same day, Camille had brought home a scented candle labeled Clarity and asked if I wouldn't mind keeping the downstairs space fragrance-free. I wrapped my cardigan tighter. The stitched seam held, but I felt the tug. The slice of bread sat uneaten on my knee. I let it fall. In the corner, a shoebox with old gloves leaned open. Inside the ring, Walter gave me for our 20th turquoise stone off-center. It still fits, but I haven't worn it. Camille once mistook it for costume jewelry. I slid the ring on. It turned slightly the way it always had. Somewhere above, a wine glass broke. There was a pause, then laughter again. No one came down. I stayed in the chair. Not because I was asked. Because I understood now that there are doors meant to stay closed, not to keep people out, but to show them where they no longer fit. And sometimes silence isn't what you're left with. It's what you choose to keep. I used to believe that if you folded things the right way, people might stop noticing the creases. The towels were her kind, the ones with the wide, ribbed borders. Camille liked them folded in thirds, then halved once edges tucked under. She said it looked more intentional. I practiced that fold using the beige set I'd brought from the old apartment until my fingers remembered the motion like prayer. When I got it right, she didn't say anything. That was the reward. The upstairs fridge was full of almond milk and bottled green juice. I boiled eggs early, peeled them under the range light, and lined them in glass containers by shelf height, never mixing mine with theirs. I ate before they came down. Quiet was the easiest condiment. Sometimes Madeline came into the kitchen too early and spotted me with my cereal bowl. She'd ask what I was eating, and I'd offer her a bite on the end of my spoon. Once Camille entered while Maddie was licking the last bit of banana off her fingers. "She doesn't need processed sugar before school," Camille said. She adjusted the thermostat and didn't wait for me to answer. I began leaving the fruit in her lunchbox instead. The first winter, the floor downstairs started sweating. Travis said it was a foundation issue, not something they planned to fix. I bought a small dehumidifier with my own account, carried it home on the bus, and let it run next to the wall behind the laundry sink. The hum it made kept me from hearing the upstairs sometimes. Travis once brought home a guest from work, some out-of-town colleague. I was in the middle of rinsing a load of white sheets. I heard him walking the man through the house, pointing out fixtures, the new stone countertops, the gallery wall Camille curated from Etsy prints. When they passed the door to the basement, Travis cleared his throat and said, "That's storage. We don't really go down there anymore." I looked at the detergent bottle, wondering if the label had changed. I'd bought it the week before. Travis had given me a grocery list with exact brands, told me to stick to it because this house has a look. I'd memorized that list. I didn't buy the tea I liked. One morning, the doorknob to the basement didn't turn right. Camille said it was because the house was settling. Later, Travis mentioned he'd added a new lock so that Maddie doesn't get into the cleaning chemicals. I stopped keeping the hand soap on the stair ledge. There was a day I suggested getting a small fridge, just one of those cube models, so I wouldn't take up space upstairs. I even circled one in the Sunday ad, showed it to Camille at the counter while she measured oats. "We don't want to give the wrong impression," she said, sliding the ad aside. It's not like this is your apartment. It's all one household and you're just part of it. Her hand brushed a spot on the counter twice, like something sticky had lingered. That afternoon, I took the tangerines out of the bowl and placed them on a napkin inside my dresser drawer. Camille once referred to me in front of a delivery man as our house guest. Another time, when a friend came by to drop off books for a charity drive, I heard Camille say through the cracked bathroom door, "She's still here. We're figuring it out." I looked at myself in the mirror that day and noticed that the hem of my shirt had a tiny hole. Just one thread pulled loose. I stitched it after they left for dinner. When Travis mentioned budgeting during a Sunday coffee meeting in the dining room, he clicked open a spreadsheet on his laptop and turned the screen to Camille. "She's not contributing income. That's fine for now. But it's all coming from our accounts." The word "our" sat in my throat longer than the coffee. They never asked me for money. They didn't need to. I trimmed my prescriptions to every other day. I stopped buying newspapers. I reused the same stamps by taping over them and asking the librarian to reweigh envelopes. Once, Travis walked in while I was ironing Maddie's school blouse. He paused in the doorway and said, "You know you don't have to act like staff to be appreciated." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what he meant. Camille once bought a new set of dishes and gave away the old ones through a community app. I saw them stacked by the garage door in a cardboard box. One plate had a crack. I remembered Walter had dropped it when he sneezed mid-dinner. I picked it up and turned it in my hands. It was already cold. "I figured you wouldn't want chipped things," Camille said later, not looking up from her phone. "We're just trying to create a fresh space." She asked me to stop using the hallway as a transition area for my things. I had left my canvas tote there after returning from the library. It held 3 paperback novels and a notepad with my handwriting. I carried it back down and emptied it beneath the water heater. I never raised my voice. I didn't explain the reasons behind my habits. When Travis made a joke once about earning your keep, I smiled as if I understood. I didn't ask what I'd cost them. I scrubbed the bathroom tiles with a toothbrush. I learned which cabinet shelves creaked and avoided them after dark. I stitched loose buttons with clear thread. I apologized when I ran the dryer too long. I stopped buying honey. I stopped humming while folding, and I never asked what I was to them. Only once did I ask for something for the basement window to be cleaned so the light could come in. Travis said maybe if time allowed. Camille mentioned that the basement wasn't really designed for natural lighting preferences. That night I wiped the inside pane with a damp rag. The streaks never left. It's not that I didn't have things to say. It's that they never asked in a way that left room for answers. I've learned that erasure doesn't always come with a shout. Sometimes it's frosted over in buttercream and spelled wrong. There was a birthday, my 66th, I think, where Camille ordered a cake that read "Happy Retirement" in purple cursive. No name, no candles. Just an exclamation mark that felt too excited for something I hadn't done. The cake sat in the fridge for 2 days. I had one slice. The frosting stained the knife. "I figured it was more versatile," she said when I glanced at the blank corner. "We can reuse the decorations next time if needed." I folded the napkins into triangles and cleared the table after they finished. The string of battery lights they'd taped above the counter blinked out one by one that evening. I didn't change the batteries. A month later, Travis bought Camille a silk robe for her birthday, pale ivory with a belt that tied like a ribbon at the hip. He brought it home in a glossy bag with a gold seal. I'd tucked $40 into his wallet that week, just enough to feel like I'd contributed. When she opened the gift, I watched from the kitchen doorway. She smiled the way people do when they know the cameras are on. "Oh, babe, you always get it right." She didn't know about the envelope I'd slid in. Or maybe she did. My name never came up. Later, while washing the mugs, I found the receipt in the trash. I folded it into my pocket without knowing why. Maddie once came home with a project for school, a solar system made of foam balls and wire. She stared at the directions her mouth bent into the shape it makes when she's pretending she isn't overwhelmed. I offered to help hold the spray paint while she tied the strings. She called me engineer grandma and said I made Saturn's rings look like jewelry. The project won second place. Camille shared a photo on her page. She's a little genius, just like her dad. There was no mention of who held the spray paint or who stayed up to glue Jupiter's storm with a toothpick dipped in copper ink. I never said anything. I just kept the leftover blue paint in a jar under the sink in case she ever wanted to make Neptune again. One morning, I suggested we hang a family photo in the living room. Something recent with all of us in it. There was one from last fall where we stood on the porch in matching sweaters. My hair was out of place, but Maddie's arm wrapped around my waist made it my favorite. Camille smoothed the front of her blouse and closed the drawer where she kept the measuring tape. We're going minimalist. Clean lines, fewer distractions. The word distractions fell into the silence like a stone in a still sink. That photo stayed on my nightstand. I looked at it sometimes before bed, not long, just enough to remember I had once been framed. On laundry days, I noticed my things made a smaller pile. Fewer pieces, fewer reasons to take up space. I hand-washed my camisoles now. I let them air dry in the corner behind the furnace. The clothespins I used were from our first home. Walter had labeled them with our initials. The J had faded, but the grooves were still there if I traced them with my thumb. Once, while walking back from the mailbox, Camille pointed at a package. "If that's yours, can you open it downstairs?" We're trying to keep the entry uncluttered. It was a pair of thermal socks I'd ordered online with a promo code. I opened the package sitting on the basement stairs, the tape catching on my nail. The receipt fell into a crack near the railing. I didn't retrieve it. There was a text chain once from Camille's phone that I read by accident when she left it charging on the counter. It was to a friend, someone named Dana. "She's fine, just always there." You know, the punctuation made it worse than the words. As if my presence was something that needed to be whispered, but not examined. I returned the phone to its place and straightened the charger cord. The garbage bin in the garage had a label on it now. Recycling in all caps. My handwriting was underneath faded marker from before the sticker. They never mentioned replacing it. I don't think they noticed. Travis used to call on Wednesdays when he first moved out. "Just to check in. Thought I'd hear your voice for a minute." He doesn't remember those calls. I do. He asked me once to stop leaving notes on the fridge. "It feels busy," he said. I stopped writing them, but sometimes I wrote them anyway and folded them into my book pages. I don't know what I was saving them for. The books on the shelf upstairs shifted over time. My gardening manuals disappeared first, replaced by volumes with titles about optimizing mornings and living intentionally. The kind of books that look good when photographed. I never asked where mine went. Maybe they're in the attic. Maybe they were donated. In the dining room, there's a bowl of decorative spheres, wooden silver one made of twine. Maddie once put a marble in there, and Camille plucked it out. It throws the balance. Balance, it seems, has no room for things that don't match the set. The memories that remain aren't loud. They sit like dust on high surfaces. You don't notice them until the light shifts. I stopped offering suggestions. I learned which silences were safest. I practiced folding until the fabric creased before my hands reached it. They never told me to disappear. They just rearranged the room until I didn't fit. And I adjusted until the space I took felt borrowed, even when no one asked me to leave. Hope never felt like a celebration. It always came quiet, like a drawer you opened slowly to keep from waking anyone. Walter used to buy one scratch-off ticket every Saturday after picking up the paper. He'd scratch it on the front steps, the coin from his army belt buckle catching light in the morning sun. When he stopped working, he joked that the ticket was his new job. I never asked if he meant it. I kept the habit after he passed. Not weekly, not ritually. Just enough to remember him sitting on that step, shoulders rounded like he was hiding something good. He never won more than $10. That wasn't the point. Noah at the counter called me Miss J. He always smiled when I reached for the Buckeye Gold or the Ruby Rush. Fingers crossed, huh? I nodded, even when I used exact change from the zippered pouch in my purse. That morning, I sat near the laundry sink and pulled the ticket from the paper bag. Buckeye Bonanza. Purple foil gold numbers. I used Walter's coin. Still carried it in the little pocket of my wallet. The metal edge was worn smooth on one side. One row, then another, a 3, a 17, a 12. My eyes didn't jump. My breath didn't catch. Just numbers lining up like they'd been waiting to meet each other. In the last box it said 12.5 million grand prize. I didn't stand. I didn't run. I took the pen from the drawer where I kept expired coupons and wrote my name on the back the way Walter had taught me. Full name. Middle initial. Legible. I folded it into the linen pouch I used for receipts and slid it into the bottom of my knitting basket. The yarn was tangled. I hadn't started a new pattern in months. I placed the pouch under the unused skeins next to the tape measure that no longer retracted. That evening, Camille shouted something from the hallway. I was wiping down the basement railing. Her voice carried through the vent. Travis, there's a scratcher in Mom's laundry. Check it, check the numbers. I kept folding. The pants were still warm. One sock had a hole in the heel. Their voices moved fast, overlapping. Cabinet doors opened. Camille gasped. Travis used the word unreal twice. I had thrown away an old ticket the week before. I didn't check if it was the one they found. I didn't need to. By the next morning, the television was replaced. Flat, large, boxed-in plastic. I heard Camille on the phone. We're celebrating tonight. Nothing public yet. Travis ordered wine, Italian. Camille asked for a bag from a shop she used to call aspirational. I recognized the name from the catalog she once left open on the kitchen island, with a sticky note beside a red leather purse. They played music louder than usual, laughed at things with sharp edges. Maddie asked once if I wanted to come upstairs. Camille told her, "Let Grandma rest. She needs quiet." That night, I rewound the voicemail from my pharmacy to double-check if I could afford both prescriptions that month. I decided to have the dosage again. I didn't mention it. The next day, Camille knocked on the basement door. Her knuckles were dry. The kind of knock you use when you've already decided the conversation. "It's time, Joyce. This house isn't for freeloaders anymore. No emphasis, no pause. Just a line read clean like a rule printed on a wall." Travis stood behind her, arms folded. He pointed toward the stairs. "We gave you shelter. Now we have plans. Don't ruin this." The suitcases were already packed. My navy one had a broken wheel. The zipper pulled slightly to one side. Camille had placed my toiletries in a plastic bag, sealed with tape. My toothbrush was damp. I didn't ask where they wanted me to go. I didn't ask why they hadn't looked at the back of the ticket. I picked up the old coat with the missing button and slid my arms in slowly so the seam under the shoulder wouldn't rip. The wool had thinned near the elbows. The front door closed behind me with the kind of click that felt polite, but firm. They didn't follow. The porch light turned off automatically when the door shut. Inside the pocket of my coat, the ticket remained folded. My name still visible. The ink had not smudged. I hadn't touched it since the morning I signed it. I didn't look back. Some things once lost don't wait to be retrieved. Some things once taken don't have to be returned. And some truths stay quiet until no one bothers to question them. Some things lose their weight when you stop trying to carry them out loud. I didn't leave a note. I didn't take the framed photos or the scarves I hadn't worn in years. Just the suitcase with the crooked wheel and the cloth bag with my initials stitched too close to the edge. I'd done it by hand with thread from Walter's sewing tin, back when I still thought homemade meant something to people. The bus was late. I sat on the metal bench trying not to wrinkle my coat. I kept the ticket folded inside the pocket of my purse beneath a faded grocery list and an emergency Band-Aid I'd never used. It stayed there, not out of fear, but out of some quiet knowing. Paper like that didn't need to speak often. Its truth held even when unopened. I took the route that passed the school. The sidewalk chalk was still faint along the curb, hopscotch and uneven hearts. One square had the name Maddie in shaky cursive. I didn't linger. She wouldn't have been at recess then, and I didn't want to wave at a window that wasn't looking down. At the library, the smell hadn't changed. Still paper and soft dust and the faint citrus of old cleaning fluid. I nodded to the desk assistant without waiting for recognition. I went to the far corner where the outlet worked next to the window that looked out at the church parking lot. The wooden chair creaked when I sat. It had always done that. I pulled out my phone, the one Travis once called prehistoric, and plugged it in. The cord bent slightly where the rubber had peeled. It still worked if I didn't move it too much. There was no plan, no strategy, just a quiet question that had bloomed too far to uproot. Was it enough that I had signed it? That my name was still mine, written in ink? Nobody else bothered to read. I typed Midland State Lottery Commission into the search bar. The screen took time to load. I read each word slowly, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to feel each one settle. There was a button labeled Submit Claim. Below it, a form. I took out the ticket. I laid it flat against the library table away from the sunlight. My signature was clear. No flourish. Just my name the way Walter used to write it on envelopes when he mailed me postcards from work trips. He always added, "Love you, Jay," on the back. I never threw them away. I uploaded the photo Noah had once taken. He'd snapped it half jokingly at the register saying, "Proof for when you win Miss J." I'd laughed without knowing how close he was. Next, I found the ATM withdrawal from 3 days before. $10 exact. I remembered the feel of the bills slightly damp from my hand. Once I'd attached everything, I hesitated. Not because I doubted, but because I realized there was no one I needed to tell. No name to text. No number I trusted. I clicked submit and closed the tab. I found a book of essays I'd once read with Maddie. The cover was bent a corner folded by some small, impatient hand. I didn't borrow it. I just kept it near. Mrs. Beverly Reed was shelving books 2 rows over. She had silver pins in her bun now. I hadn't seen her since they moved me into the basement. She glanced over and blinked twice. Looking for something, I waited. I lifted the ticket just slightly, not enough for details. Just enough for the weight. If someone signed something, I said quietly, "Is that enough to prove it's theirs?" Her head tilted. The way it did when she used to help me find tax forms in March. "Is this about your boy again?" I smiled, small the way people do when they're too far from the truth to explain it. "I'm just wondering if a signature still counts." She nodded once, as if that answer had already been waiting in her somewhere. I left the ticket in my bag and folded the chair back under the table when I stood. Around the corner of the library was a narrow walkway that led to a separate door. The wood was chipped near the base, but the lock still turned smoothly. Shirley Cobb rented out the small room behind the library, once a meeting space, now barely a studio. She offered it to me years ago after Walter passed, said I could use it for breathing space if I ever needed one. She didn't ask why I was back. She opened the door, handed me a key, and pointed at the kettle. "There's mint in the windowsill box. I water it Thursdays." I nodded. No questions. No explanations. Just mint and a kettle and a window that faced east. The room smelled faintly of old lemon polish. The bed creaked when I sat, but it was high off the ground and warm under the quilt. I placed the ticket under the drawer liner in the nightstand, not hidden, just waiting. No one knew where I was. No messages, no missed calls. They didn't ask. I didn't need them to. Some things don't need to be declared to be real. They just need to be held in silence long enough to bloom. I hadn't realized how much space could fit inside a silence until no one tried to fill it. The room had only what it needed: a bed that sat a little off balance, a nightstand with uneven legs, a lamp with a cord that sparked slightly when adjusted too quickly. The bulb worked, so I didn't change it. The switch was loose, and I flicked it carefully with the back of my fingernail. I had learned over time that some things keep working as long as you don't push them too hard. The window faced east. In the morning, the light came in as a flat, uninterrupted sheet. It fell on the wood floor like it was trying not to draw attention. Outside the laundromat across the street coughed out steam from its side vents, a rhythm I came to rely on constant, ordinary, without judgment. The wallpaper in the room was floral in a way that had forgotten what flowers looked like. Tiny blue and gray clusters repeating themselves too politely to be noticed. I ran my fingers along one curl near the windowsill and found a torn seam where moisture had lifted the paper. I didn't smooth it back. I just let it rise quietly. The cabinet over the sink was lined with an old newspaper. The date on the top read 1997. I didn't recognize any of the headlines. Someone had once circled a furniture ad in blue ink. The price of a sofa was lower than what Camille spent on throw pillows. There was a tin of dried mint Shirley kept on the ledge. She watered the plant on Thursdays, she'd told me. I made tea from it each morning, boiling water in a chipped enamel kettle that let out a whimper rather than a whistle. The tea wasn't strong. It left no aftertaste. I liked that. I drank it slowly at the table, sitting in a wooden chair that creaked when I leaned too far to one side. The table had a single drawer where I found a pad of lined paper with half of a grocery list still scribbled on the first sheet: milk, light bulbs, toilet paper, breadcrumbs. I kept the list there and added nothing to it. I didn't write letters. I didn't call anyone. I folded one page of the pad into quarters and wrote on it, instead, "I exist." I signed the truth. Then I taped it to the inside of the cabinet above the kettle. I didn't open that cabinet for anything else. The email had come in the day before. No images, no fanfare. Just a white screen and black letters from Midland State Lottery Commission. The message was simple. We confirm that Joyce E. Whitaker is the legal claimant of the ticket number 3JX98. The claim is under process. No one had seen me read it. No one needed to. I didn't print the message. I didn't reply to it. I closed the tab and folded my hands around the mug, warming my fingers against the ceramic that held heat better than most people I'd known. The ticket remained in the drawer of the nightstand, tucked beneath the liner that curled slightly at one edge. I didn't check it again. My name was still on it. That was enough. I started writing in a small brown notebook Shirley had left on the shelf. The cover was soft worn at the corners. The spine cracked when opened, like it had waited too long to be touched. I didn't write full entries, just fragments. The way Walter's shoes always squeaked on tile. The sound Maddie made when she chewed ice. The way Camille once folded napkins diagonally, like it was a skill worth keeping. I didn't reread what I wrote. I turned each page only once. At night, I listened to the buzz of the laundromat's vending machine across the street. I imagined people pressing buttons without looking, taking whatever dropped. There was comfort in that kind of choosing. I began washing my clothes by hand, not for any reason, just because it filled the time between one cup of tea and the next. I used the lavender bar soap Shirley kept in a dish near the sink. I liked how it foamed quickly, as if trying to be helpful. My blouses dried on the back of a folding chair. One of them sagged in the middle. I wore it anyway. When I went to the corner store for bread, the clerk didn't ask my name. He handed me my change without looking at my hands. I appreciated that. He didn't notice the way I counted coins twice before sliding them over. Or if he did, he didn't say. The paper bag they gave me had a grease mark near the bottom. I turned it inside out when I got home and used it to line the trash bin. I didn't throw away anything that day, but I liked having it ready. There was a florist 3 doors down that sold loose stems. I passed by the display 3 times before stepping in. A girl with a red apron asked, "Who's it for?" I looked past her at the bucket of carnations. I chose one, pale yellow, a little browning at the edge. No one I answered. She wrapped it anyway. The paper crinkled when I held it. I placed the flower in a jar by the window when I got back. No vase, no ribbon. Just water and the jar I'd rinsed twice. I didn't center it. I didn't trim the stem. It leaned slightly to the left and I let it. I didn't photograph it. I didn't tell Shirley I'd bought it. I didn't even smell it. It was simply there. Like me. No need to justify itself. No need to bloom louder than necessary. Some numbers ring even when you don't pick them up. They hum against your palm like the memory of something left unresolved. I kept the phone face down on the desk in the library. The little vibration against the wood echoed too loudly in a place built for whispers. I let it ring. The calls came in clusters unknown, then again, then once more with a voicemail I didn't play. The first text appeared while I was returning a copy of Collected American Essays to the shelf. The screen lit up just as I reached for the W section. "Mom, we need to talk. There's been confusion about the ticket. The ellipses gave it away. Not concern, not apology, just rehearsal." I wiped my hand on my sleeve and slipped the book into place. I didn't open the message again. Another came by evening. "We found a ticket. We thought it was real. Honest mistake. Let's just split it, okay?" The word just scratched at the corner of the sentence like a plea trying to dress as reason. I looked at the text for a while. I turned off notifications after that. I kept my routines. I watered the plant Shirley left by the window, a little spider fern, whose tips browned despite my care. I added 2 lines to my notebook. People speak loudest when they think they've been quiet too long. People apologize when their reflection won't say it for them. By Thursday, the tone had shifted. "You need to stop this. We gave you a place to live. A roof. You're doing this to Maddie, not us." They always used her name like punctuation, as if my granddaughter's face could soften what they couldn't say without teeth. Shirley knocked lightly that afternoon and left a cup of warm milk on the counter. She didn't ask questions, only said, "Looks like you've got folks real interested in you lately." That night, Beverly walked over to the library desk during closing. Her glasses had slipped low, and she held her tablet like it was a broken plate she didn't want to drop. "I thought you might want to see what's been floating around," she said, not looking at me. It was a post, Camille's account public. A photo of Maddie sitting on their couch, chin resting on her palm. Her expression was blank, caught between poses. The caption read, "Some people steal even from their own blood. Shameful. Pray for our family." Below were comments. "What kind of mother sues her own son? Bitter old woman. Hope the court sees through her lies. That money belongs to Maddie's future." The words rolled across the screen like ice down a windshield. Cold, fast, and with nowhere to hide from. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I closed the screen and pushed the tablet back to Beverly with a gentle tap of 2 fingers. She didn't say more. She just squeezed my wrist once and walked away. Later, I pulled out the envelope I'd tucked in the inside pocket of my coat. The paper had softened along the folds from being handled too much. Inside were the photo Noah had snapped at his counter, the blurred image of me holding the scratch-off half smiling. The receipt for the $10 I withdrew that day, a copy of the signed back of the ticket. I added a printed version of the confirmation email from the commission. No highlighter, no margin notes. I walked to the print and copy desk and asked the young woman behind the glass if she could scan the whole packet into one file. "Anything specific you want to label it?" she asked without looking up. "Truth is fine," I said. She didn't pause. Didn't raise a brow. I uploaded the file later that night. The email was short. "Ms. Donnelly, if you're still interested in what's real behind the noise, here it is. J. Whitaker." I didn't include a phone number. The next morning, a different tone filled the voicemails, one from Travis. Softer. "Look, we all made mistakes. We were confused. It's not like we knew what was going on. We thought it was a family thing. Please don't drag this into the media." Then Camille. "So you're going to let strangers tell Maddie her grandma's a thief? That's what you want now." And finally, a silence. No message. Just 3 missed calls in a row. I boiled water. The mint tin rattled as I opened it. The tea tasted thinner that morning. I added a second pinch of leaves. Still, it left nothing behind on my tongue. I sat down at the table where the sun had started warming the edge of the notebook I left open. My pen slid across the paper as if the words had been waiting. I used to believe family meant never needing proof. Now I keep copies. On the inside flap of the notebook, I wrote 3 dates. One for the day I bought the ticket, one for the day I signed it, and one for today. I didn't list birthdays anymore, not even my own. I folded the page in half and slipped it beneath the flower jar, where the carnation had finally bent its head all the way down. I didn't remove it. I let it stay. I glanced at the phone again. This time it stayed dark. For once, no one had anything to say. And that was the clearest moment of the week. I never thought a pot of marigolds would feel like a statement. I placed them by the sill with no real plan, just a nudge from the florist when she said they were low maintenance and good for sun. They leaned slightly toward the light, not unlike the way I'd begun to sit closer to the window, warming my hands on a chipped mug of mint tea. The sound of the laundromat cart scraping against pavement became less startling, more like punctuation. I didn't tell anyone when I took the job. It was just 2 afternoons a week, shelving large print books at the branch across town. I remembered the smell of plastic jackets and carpet cleaner. No one there knew where I used to live or what had been said. They only knew I put things in alphabetical order and wiped smudges from covers without being asked. One morning, Shirley placed a folded paper on the table next to my tea. She didn't speak. I unfolded it and saw the letterhead from Midland State Lottery Commission. My name printed clear and without fanfare, followed by words I already knew by heart. Your claim has been approved. Funds will be transferred within 14 business days. No commas after my name, no added explanations, just a single fact written plainly like weather. The envelope had already been opened. I didn't mind. Shirley and I never needed to say things outright. She'd given me the spare room behind the bookshop without asking questions, and I'd watered her succulents when she forgot. I only whispered, "Thank you for the tea," and she nodded, like that was enough. When I left my son's house, I had nothing framed. Now a copy of the lottery ticket sat inside a plain wooden frame on the shelf above my kettle. Not hung, just there. I never looked at it for long. It wasn't about the numbers. It was about the pen stroke across the back, my own name signed, without trembling. A week later, I bought a coat. Not secondhand, not discounted, just one that fit me at the shoulders. The woman at the register said, "It's perfect for you. I paid in cash." She didn't know that for years I wore sweaters pilled with age because new ones might clutter the laundry schedule. I hadn't realized how many times I used to say, "That's fine, not anymore." I kept the phone for a while. The same old number. Messages came in from numbers I once knew by heart. First it was, "Hey Mom, things got confusing. Let's talk." Then, "We know now it was yours, we just want a piece. For Maddie." I didn't reply. Not even when Camille sent a voicemail, her voice composed falsely sweet. "We miss you. Maddie asks about you. Surely you don't want her to grow up without her grandmother." I didn't believe that for a moment. When I helped Maddie build her solar system model, Camille said, "She doesn't need help. Don't overstep." When I asked if I could attend her spring concert, Camille shrugged. "It's for parents, really. Might be awkward." I pressed the power button. The screen went black. I slid out the SIM card, snapped it in two, and placed it inside an envelope marked junk on Shirley's outgoing mail pile. A man at the library asked if I could help his granddaughter with reading. I told him I only had mornings free. He smiled, handed me a list of books she liked, and said, "Just be kind. That's what she needs." I showed up the next day with a copy of Charlotte's Web. The little girl had big eyes and called me Miss Joy. I didn't correct her. For once, I said yes to something not out of guilt or habit, but because I wanted to. The word mother had become quiet in my mind. It used to echo first as identity, then as obligation, then as accusation. Now it sat still like a teacup on the edge of the counter. I didn't reach for it, but I didn't knock it over either. Camille posted something online a few days after the story aired. We were tricked. Family loyalty isn't always rewarded. Underneath, someone commented, "That old woman didn't owe you anything." I didn't feel vindicated, just still. Karen the reporter had been kind in the way reporters rarely are. She only printed what she could verify. No dramatics. Just facts and a closing line. The rightful claimant remains anonymous. Her silence speaks louder than any press statement. Shirley brought me the newspaper. I folded it carefully and slid it between two books I never planned to reread. Not hidden, just filed. My groceries now fit in a basket, not a cart. I bought fresh herbs and learned how to freeze single portions. No one told me I couldn't cook those smells in the house anymore. I made lentil stew with a cracked bay leaf, the kind my husband liked. I set a place at the table, then moved the spoon to the drawer. I wasn't ready for ceremony. One afternoon, a woman from the bank called to confirm the wire transfer. I politely answered her questions, declined the financial advisor. "That's a lot of money," she said. I didn't reply. She didn't ask again. I bought a mailbox with my own name on it. When a friend from church called and said, "They've been asking about you. Maybe it's time to forgive," I cut her off gently. I no longer live where forgiveness is currency. There was a pause, then a breath, then the click of understanding. I took a photo of the marigolds. Just one. No filter. I didn't share it. I printed it and tucked it inside my journal. It would fade eventually, but the light it held wouldn't. I don't need to be remembered. I only need not to disappear. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound, but from the decision not to speak. I stood in line at the post office with a plain manila envelope in my coat pocket. The weight of it wasn't much, just a single folded page inside, but it rested in my palm like something final. The woman ahead of me tapped her heel impatiently. A boy next to her balanced a stack of bubble mailers against his chest. I waited calmly the way one waits at the edge of something they no longer fear. When it was my turn, I handed the envelope to the clerk and said, "No return address." She didn't ask why. Inside was a single sentence written on a sheet torn from my notepad, the kind Walter used to buy in packs of 5 at the drugstore. The ink had pressed through a little too hard. "I no longer live in your basement. I live above ground with sunlight." No name, no bitterness, just truth. After that, I walked straight to the bank. I'd made the appointment under my full name, middle initial included. The account that once had both my name and Travis's had a modest sum left in it, something I'd kept untouched out of habit more than trust. I transferred it to my own name and closed the joint account without ceremony. The banker said, "Would you like to notify the other account holder?" I shook my head. I wasn't erasing myself. I was removing their shadow. Back home, I took the envelope of official mail from the mailbox, still addressed in my old name, the one they used when it suited them. I sat at the kitchen table and began crossing names off lists: magazine subscriptions, pharmacy auto calls, library notifications still linked to Maddie's school. I filled out a USPS change of address form and wrote in all capital letters across the bottom margin, "Do not forward mail from the Whitaker residence." I dropped it in the outgoing bin. The woman behind the counter said, "That'll take effect in a day or two." I nodded and walked out without looking back. The realtor had hesitated when I said I'd pay in cash. "It's unusual," she said. I smiled. She asked, "Is this an investment purchase?" I said, "It's the first place that will have my name on the deed and no one else's hands in the drawers." That shut the conversation down. The house wasn't large. A one-story structure with faded shutters and a roof that would need resealing in 3 or 4 winters. But it had a wooden porch and a narrow strip of dirt where tulips could go. The living room smelled of dust and old vinyl, but the windows opened easily. There was a fireplace that no longer worked, and a small attic filled with forgotten newspaper bundles from the 90s. I didn't throw them away, I just left them where they were. Not everything needed removing. Some things were just done. The woman from the hardware store engraved the nameplate in under an hour. She handed it to me in a paper bag with a nod. Brushed bronze plain serif font. Joyce E. Whitaker. No guests without tea. I held it in my lap the whole ride back. The taxi driver didn't ask questions. I tipped him more than I used to think was proper. The first thing I brought into the house wasn't furniture. It was a box of dried lavender tied with string. I placed it on the counter where a microwave might go. I'd lived long enough being told what I needed. Now I chose what I didn't. A neighbor across the street waved as she unloaded groceries from her trunk. I waved back, but didn't cross over. I wasn't lonely. I was simply unshared. Camille once said during a family dinner, "Some people always need someone to depend on. It's exhausting." She'd looked at me when she said it, not directly, but long enough to land the weight. I didn't respond. That night I washed the dishes slowly, careful not to chip the plate she once called too dull to display. I didn't bring that plate with me. I brought one china saucer from a garage sale years ago. Pale blue hairline crack through the rim. I drank from it the first evening in the house. Mint tea again. Different kettle, same habit. The letter from the lottery commission arrived in a thick envelope. It contained a final confirmation and a series of options for wealth management. I signed the box marked "No advisors." Private transfer only. There was a line in the fine print that read, "Funds may be used in any manner deemed fit by the verified claimant." I circled that line and then threw the papers in the drawer. A friend from the old church texted, "Your son is devastated. Maybe now is the time to rebuild bridges." I read it once, then deleted it. Rebuilding required 2 sides. I was building something else entirely, stillness with no audience. No one called after that, not even Maddie. But she was a child placed between mirrors. I never blamed her for choosing the clearer reflection. On the front porch, I installed the nameplate myself. It took longer than expected. The drill was second-hand and the screws kept slipping. I kept going. No one offered help. That was the best part. When it was done, I stood back, wiping my hands on the hem of my shirt. The brass caught the light, just right. A neighbor passing with her dog glanced at it, read the words, and smiled. She didn't stop. She didn't need to. I didn't want visitors. I wanted room to breathe. The final thing I did that week was place a folded piece of paper in the back of my journal. It read, "No return, no reply, no regret." I closed the cover gently, not with finality, but with precision. Some things don't need to be shouted to be complete. I never liked the sound of ticking clocks. They seem to remind people of endings. I prefer the quiet rustle of leaves, the sigh of the kettle, when it's ready, the small sounds that ask for nothing. The teapot is porcelain pale blue with faded gold trim. My mother gave it to me the week before I married Walter. Camille once called it clutter that smells like dust. I remember her voice not sharp, just bored. I pour hot water into the pot and let the mint leaves steep slowly without rushing them. Outside, the sun stretches low across the garden bed, catching on the edges of the petals. The roses are just beginning to open. I trimmed them yesterday, not out of duty, but because I like how they look in the glass vase on the kitchen table. I don't set them for anyone else. They are for the space I wake up in and return to each evening. There's a photo on the wall, the only one I've chosen to frame. I'm standing in front of Noah's store holding a lottery ticket, smiling. Not a big smile, just the kind that rests in the corners of your face when you're not aware it's there. He took that photo as a joke. I asked him to send it to my email later, and I printed it at the library. It didn't need explaining. I still wake early. Some mornings, I walk to the bakery 2 blocks down. The woman behind the counter greets me with "Mrs. J, usual today," and she means the oat honey biscuit I like. No one calls me Travis's mom anymore. No one talks over me like I'm not in the room. It's a small thing, but it fits better than most expensive ones. Most of the money is in a credit union account under my name only. A portion went to the library's children's section, a quiet donation with no name attached. They replaced their torn Dr. Seuss books and bought a new beanbag chair for the reading corner. I didn't ask for thanks. I just noticed the difference when I stopped by. I haven't traveled, haven't bought new furniture, haven't upgraded my car. The old sedan still runs and it knows how to take me home. Beverly comes by sometimes with strawberries. Shirley once brought over a bag of mystery novels and told me, "Don't read the endings first." I nodded. We sat and ate crackers. They never asked about my family, and I never offered. The article by Karen Donnelly came and went. For a few weeks it stirred ripples. The headline was gentle but clear. She signed the truth, a lottery claim and a family's fall. My name was omitted. The photo showed my hands holding a mug of tea, nothing else. After it went live, I heard about the rest in fragments. Travis's company issued a statement about ethics violations and reputational damage. Camille's school fundraiser position was revoked. Their social media disappeared, and the house went on the market soon after. They moved to a rental in a city where no one recognized them or cared to. A friend from the old neighborhood passed along a comment, "Even Maddie doesn't laugh like she used to." But I don't carry those stories around. They're not mine anymore. I keep the curtains open. Sunlight doesn't need permission to come in. The floor creaks a little under the armchair where I read. The cushions are soft, now molded to the shape I've made. A letter arrived last week. No return address. A brown envelope with a child's watercolor tucked inside roses in the background. A woman sitting in a chair holding a book. There was no note, no signature, but the painting had small things. Only someone who watched closely would know the way. My left wrist bends the stripes on the blanket over my knees, the chipped corner of the wooden table beside me. I didn't frame it. I didn't hang it. I placed it beside the teapot where I could see it if I chose to. The radio in the kitchen still works, though I rarely turn it on. I find the quiet is not empty now, it's wide. It holds the rhythm of my breath, the sound of scissors clipping a stem, the flick of a page turned slow. I don't open the mailbox expecting letters anymore. I don't wait for phone calls or apologies. If someone wants to reach me, they'll have to do so without noise. I've kept the nameplate on the front porch. Joyce E. Whitaker. No guests without tea. No one's knocked without a reason. And if they do knock, I open the door slowly. I don't hide. But I no longer make room for those who only arrive when they've lost their own footing. Once I thought survival meant proving I had value. Now I measure worth differently. By the tea that stays warm while I finish a paragraph. By the tulips blooming without fanfare. By the peace that doesn't ask me to perform. I live here in this little house with the creaky floors and the worn blue pot and the smell of mint that settles in the corners. I live with no need to be explained, defended, or claimed. And I've come to believe a quiet life lived truthfully is a kind of wealth that can't be taken or split. That's enough for me.